Two people receive the exact same devastating piece of news. One reinterprets the situation to find a silver lining and feels genuinely better within minutes. The other grits their teeth, forces a neutral expression, and suppresses any outward sign of distress, appearing composed, but internally paying a measurable physiological and cognitive price. Decades of emotion regulation research reveal why these two seemingly similar coping strategies produce such dramatically different outcomes. Cognitive reappraisal is an emotion regulation strategy that involves reinterpreting the meaning of a potentially emotional situation before the full emotional response has developed. For example, reframing a job rejection as an opportunity to find a better fitting position rather than as evidence of personal failure. Because reappraisal intervenes early in the emotion generation process, changing the interpretation that gives rise to the emotional response in the first place, it is generally associated with genuinely reduced negative emotional experience rather than merely masked outward expression of an unchanged internal state. James Gross's extensive research program on emotion regulation has found that cognitive reappraisal successfully reduces both subjective reports of negative emotional experience and objective physiological markers of arousal, including skin conductance and cardiovascular reactivity, when compared to simply experiencing an emotional situation without any regulation strategy. Importantly, reappraisal accomplishes this without imposing a significant additional cognitive load or memory cost, likely because reinterpreting a situation's meaning does not require the ongoing, effortful self-monitoring that expressive suppression demands throughout an emotional episode. Expressive suppression is an emotion regulation strategy that intervenes late in the emotional process, after an emotional response has already been generated, by deliberately inhibiting its outward behavioral and facial expression while the internal emotional experience continues largely unchanged. A person suppressing their expression during a difficult conversation might successfully maintain a calm, neutral face while still experiencing substantial internal distress, anxiety, or anger that remains unresolved and continues to be physiologically experienced despite its successful outward concealment. Gross's research consistently finds that expressive suppression, unlike reappraisal, actually increases physiological arousal, including elevated cardiovascular activity, likely reflecting the ongoing physiological effort required to continuously monitor and inhibit natural emotional expression throughout an emotional episode. Suppression also imposes a measurable cognitive cost, consuming working memory resources that would otherwise be available for other tasks, and has been shown to impair memory for information encountered during the suppression episode, since cognitive resources are diverted toward continuous self-monitoring rather than external information processing. Longitudinal research consistently finds that individuals who habitually rely on expressive suppression as their primary emotion regulation strategy show poorer psychological well-being, lower life satisfaction, reduced relationship closeness and authenticity, and elevated risk for depression and anxiety symptoms over time, compared to individuals who rely more heavily on cognitive reappraisal. This pattern likely reflects both suppression's failure to actually resolve underlying negative emotion and its interpersonal costs, since suppressing genuine emotional expression can create emotional distance and reduce the authentic connection that supports close relationships. More recent research has moved beyond simply ranking reappraisal as universally superior to suppression, finding instead that emotion regulation flexibility, the capacity to select and adaptively switch between different regulation strategies depending on the specific demands of a given situation, predicts better psychological outcomes than rigid reliance on any single strategy applied uniformly across all contexts. Suppression may be adaptively appropriate in specific brief, high-stakes professional contexts requiring composed presentation, while reappraisal is generally more beneficial for longer-term emotional processing and well-being. Cognitive reappraisal and expressive suppression reveal that not all coping strategies are created equal. How and when we intervene in the emotional process matters enormously for both our internal experience and our long-term mental health. The most adaptive approach is not rigidly choosing one strategy, but flexibly matching strategy to the demands of each specific situation.